The key was taped to the back of a photograph. I found it while cleaning out my grandmother's apartment 3 weeks after her funeral, when the grief was still raw and every drawer I opened felt like saying goodbye again. The photograph was of my grandmother as a young woman, maybe 25, standing in front of a house I didn't recognize. She was smiling, not the careful, camera-ready smile I knew from later photos, but something genuine and unguarded. She looked happy, free. I almost put the photo in the keep box without looking at the back, but something, instinct maybe, or the way the frame felt heavier than it should, made me turn it over. Taped to the back was a small brass key and a note in my grandmother's handwriting, "For Eleanor. The truth is in the safe. I'm sorry I waited so long." My name is Eleanor. I'm the only Eleanor in the family. The note was meant for me. I sat on the floor of her empty bedroom, surrounded by boxes and memories and the smell of her lavender sachets, and stared at that key. My heart was beating too fast. My hands were shaking. The truth is in the safe. What truth? What safe? My grandmother had lived simply in this small apartment for 30 years. I'd been through every closet, every drawer. I hadn't seen a safe. "I'm sorry I waited so long." Sorry for what? I stood and looked around the bedroom with new eyes. The furniture was sparse. A bed, a dresser, a nightstand. The closet held clothes I'd already sorted for donation. There was nothing that screamed hidden safe. Then I looked at the photograph again, at the house in the background. It was 2 stories, white with green shutters, a wide front porch. Beautiful in an old-fashioned way. I'd never seen that house before. My grandmother had lived in 3 places that I knew of: her childhood home, the house she shared with my grandfather until he died, and this apartment. None of them looked like the house in the photo. I turned the photo frame over in my hands, looking for more clues. That's when I noticed the slight gap between the backing and the frame, like someone had removed it and replaced it carefully, but not perfectly. I pried it open. Behind the photograph was a folded piece of paper, yellowed with age. I unfolded it with trembling fingers. It was a deed to a house at 412 Maple Street in a town 2 hours away. The owner listed was my grandmother, Eleanor Rose Bennett. The date was 1965. My grandmother had owned a house I'd never heard of for almost 60 years, and somewhere in that house was a safe, and in that safe was a truth she'd been keeping from all of us. I looked at the key in my palm. It was warm now, heated by my skin, small and ordinary, and holding the weight of secrets I couldn't yet imagine. I pulled out my phone and typed the address into maps. The house was still there. Street view showed it looking much like it did in the photo. White, green shutters, porch, older now, a bit worn, but standing. I should call my mother. I should call my aunt. I should tell someone in the family about this. But the note said, "For Eleanor." Just me. And my grandmother had waited until after she was gone to let me find it. She wanted me to go alone. I grabbed my keys and my bag. I locked the apartment behind me. I walked to my car in the fading afternoon light, the photograph and the deed and the brass key tucked carefully in my purse. I didn't know what I was going to find at 412 Maple Street, but I knew my grandmother had left it for me. And I knew, somehow I knew, that nothing would be the same after I opened that safe. My name is Eleanor Hayes. I'm 34 years old. I work as an archivist at the city library, a job that suits me, quiet, methodical, surrounded by other people's stories. I live alone in a small house with a garden I keep meaning to tend and books stacked on every surface. My grandmother was Eleanor Rose Bennett, though everyone called her Rose. I was named after her. Eleanor for her first name, though she always said I should use it because Eleanor was a strong name, a name for a woman who knew her own mind. She raised me, really, not legally, not officially, but in all the ways that mattered. My mother, Rose's daughter Sarah, had me when she was 19 and unprepared. My father left before I was born. She tried, but she was young and overwhelmed and prone to what she called restless spells, where she'd disappear for days or weeks, chasing some dream or man or version of herself she thought she'd find somewhere else. Grandma Rose was the constant, the one who packed my school lunches and taught me to braid my hair and sat with me at the kitchen table while I did homework. She lived 3 blocks away from us in a small apartment that always smelled like tea and old books and safety. When I was 8, Mom left for what she said would be just a few weeks, a job opportunity in another state, a chance to start fresh. She didn't come back for 6 months. When she did, she was different, quieter, sadder. She stayed for a year, then left again. By the time I was 12, Grandma Rose's apartment was more my home than my mother's house. By the time I was 16, it was official. I moved in with Grandma full-time, and Mom signed papers saying she was okay with it. "I'm not cut out for this," she said when she signed. She was crying, but her hand was steady. "You are. You're just like her. Strong, steady. You'll be fine." I was angry then, angry at her for leaving, angry at her for being right. I was fine because I had Grandma Rose. Now I understand better. Mom was young and broken and doing the best she could with what she had. She visited, she called, she loved me in the way she was capable of. It just wasn't the way I needed. But Grandma Rose, Grandma was everything. She worked as a seamstress most of her life, doing alterations at a bridal shop downtown. She could look at a dress and know exactly how to make it fit, how to save it, how to make something beautiful out of something that didn't quite work. She did the same with people, with me. She taught me to cook simple, good food, roast chicken, mashed potatoes, soup that could fix a bad day. She taught me to sew on buttons and hem pants and fix the small tears that life inflicts. She taught me that you could be quiet and still be strong, that you could be gentle and still stand your ground. We had routines, Sunday dinners at her table, Tuesday evenings watching old movies, Saturday mornings at the market, her hand on my elbow, teaching me how to pick the best tomatoes, the ripest peaches. She told me stories about her life, about growing up during the Depression, about meeting my grandfather at a church social, about their wedding during the war when everything was uncertain, but they were sure of each other. She told me a lot, but she never told me about the house. I graduated high school. I went to college, I got my degree in library science and my job at the archive. I visited Grandma every week, called her every few days. She came to my tiny house for holidays. We kept our routines, even as we both grew older. She aged gracefully, silver hair always neat, hands that shook a little but could still thread a needle on the first try, a mind that stayed sharp, full of memories she'd pull out like photographs, examining them in the light. But there were gaps. I noticed them sometimes, moments when I'd ask her about her past and she'd change the subject, stories that started and then stopped, a far-away look in her eyes like she was seeing something I couldn't. Once, when I was 28, I asked her, "Do you have any regrets?" We were making pie, her kitchen warm with the smell of cinnamon and apples, her hands stilled on the rolling pin. She said, "Everyone has regrets." I said, "What are yours?" She looked at me for a long moment. She said, "Staying silent when I should have spoken, protecting people who didn't need protecting, keeping secrets that should have been truths." I said, "What secrets?" She smiled, but it didn't reach her eyes. She said, Old ones, the kind that don't matter anymore.
But her hands shook a little more after that, and she didn't meet my eyes for the rest of the afternoon. I should have asked more. I should have pushed, but I didn't. I thought we had time. Then, 3 months ago, she fell. A stroke, the doctor said. Massive. She was unconscious when the neighbor found her, unconscious when the ambulance came, unconscious for the 3 days she survived in the hospital. I sat with her the whole time, held her hand, talked to her even though she couldn't answer, told her I loved her, told her everything would be okay. She died without waking up, without saying goodbye, without telling me whatever it was she'd been holding back all these years. My mother came to the funeral. She cried the loud, messy tears of someone grieving a relationship that was always complicated. My Aunt Linda came, Rosa's sister, who lived 2 states away and sent cards at Christmas but hadn't visited in years. A handful of people from the bridal shop, neighbors, friends from her church. We buried her next to my grandfather in the cemetery on the hill. The stone read, Eleanor Rose Bennett, beloved mother, grandmother, friend. I thought that was the end. I thought the story was over. And then I found the key. I drove to 412 Maple Street. As the sun was setting, painting the sky in shades of orange and pink that my grandmother would have called hopeful colors. The town was called Willowbrook. Small, quiet, the kind of place where everyone knows everyone and strangers get noticed. I've never been here before. I'd never even heard my grandmother mention it. The house sat back from the road, surrounded by maple trees that were just starting to turn autumn colors. It looked like the photograph, but older. The paint was faded, the porch sagged a little, the shutters needed repair, but it was still beautiful in a ghostly, forgotten way. There was a for sale sign in the front yard, faded, crooked, like it had been there for years. I parked on the street and sat for a moment, looking at it. My grandmother owned this house for almost 60 years and never told anyone. Why? I got out of the car. The evening air was cool and smelled like fallen leaves and wood smoke. The neighborhood was quiet, a few houses with lights on, a dog barking somewhere in the distance. No one seemed to notice me walking up the path to the front door. I tried the key in the lock. It didn't fit. Of course it didn't. That would be too easy. The key was for the safe, not the house. I walked around to the back. The yard was overgrown, rose bushes tangled with blackberry bushes, grass knee-high. There was a back porch and a door with a window I could look through. Inside, I could see a kitchen, frozen in time. A table with 2 chairs, a stove that looked like it was from the 1960s, curtains yellowed with age. I tried the back door. Locked. I looked around. No one was watching. I picked a door rock from the garden, hesitated just for a second, then broke the window. The sound was loud in the quiet evening. I waited, heart pounding, for someone to come running, to call the police, to ask what I was doing breaking into a house. No one came. I reached through carefully, avoiding the broken glass, and unlocked the door from the inside. I stepped into my grandmother's secret. The kitchen smelled like dust and old paper and time. Everything was covered in a fine layer of it. The counters, the table, the floor. But underneath the dust, Everything was neat, clean, like someone had walked out intending to come back and never did. I walked slowly through the rooms, my footsteps echoing on hardwood floors. The living room had a couch covered with a white sheet, a bookshelf full of books, a fireplace with photos on the mantel. I walked closer to the photos. There was my grandmother, young, smiling, and next to her a man that wasn't my grandfather. Taller, darker hair, kind eyes. And photo after photo, they were together, laughing, dancing, standing in front of this house with their arms around each other. My chest tightened. Who was this man? I picked up one of the frames. On the back, in my grandmother's handwriting, Thomas and Rose, 1964. Thomas, not my grandfather. My grandfather's name was James. I looked at the other photos. My grandmother and Thomas at a beach, at a Christmas tree, in a garden. All of them dated between 1963 and 1965. My mind raced. An affair? A relationship before she met my grandfather? But she married my grandfather in 1960. I'd seen the wedding photos. She was married when these were taken. I walked upstairs. 3 bedrooms. One had a double bed, neatly made. One was empty except for dust. The third was small, painted pale yellow, with a crib in the corner. A crib. I stood in the doorway and felt the air leave my lungs. My grandmother had a nursery in a house no one knew about, with a man who wasn't my grandfather. I walked to the crib. I touched the wooden rail. Inside was a small stuffed rabbit, worn soft with age. What had happened here? I searched the bedroom. In the closet, I found a safe built into the wall, hidden behind hanging clothes. It was small, black, with a keyhole. My hand shook as I pulled out the brass key. I fitted into the lock. It turned with a smooth click. Inside were papers, lots of them. I pulled them out carefully and sat on the floor with them spread around me. A birth certificate for a baby girl named Margaret Rose Bennett, born July 15th, 1965. Mother, Eleanor Rose Bennett. Father, Thomas Mitchell. My grandmother had another child, a daughter I'd never heard of, born a year before my mother. I kept reading. Adoption papers. Margaret Rose Bennett was adopted in September 1965 by a couple named Robert and Claire Stevens. My grandmother had given her up for adoption. There were letters, dozens of them, from my grandmother to someone named Claire. Thank you for the photos. She's beautiful. I hope she's happy. Does she ask about me? Please tell her I loved her. I love her still. Responses from Claire. She's doing well in school. She asks about you sometimes. We tell her you loved her very much. She looks like you. The letters spanned 40 years. The last one was dated 2005. And at the bottom of the safe, a sealed envelope with my name on it. For Eleanor. To be opened after I'm gone. I opened it with shaking hands. Inside was a letter in my grandmother's careful handwriting. My dearest Eleanor, if you're reading this, I'm gone, and you found the house and the safe, and now you know what I've kept hidden for so long. I had a daughter before your mother. Her name was Margaret. I loved a man named Thomas.
We were going to build a life in this house, but it was 1963 and I was already married and Thomas was Black and the world was not kind to people like us. When I got pregnant, we tried to run, to start over. But my husband found us and my family, and the choice was taken from me. They made me give her up. They told me it was for the best, that a mixed race child would suffer, that I was being selfish. I've regretted it every day since then. I kept this house. I couldn't sell it. It was the only place I'd been truly happy. I came here sometimes when the weight of the secret got too heavy. I sat in the rooms and remembered. Thomas died in 1968. I never stopped loving.
Margaret, I don't know where she is now. The adoption was closed. The Stevens family moved when she was 10, and the letters stopped. I've tried to find her, but I failed. I'm leaving this to you because you're strong enough to decide what to do with it. Maybe you'll find her. Maybe you'll leave it buried. Maybe you'll understand why I kept the secret. Or maybe you'll be angry that I did. But you deserve to know the truth. I'm sorry I wasn't brave enough to tell you while I was alive. I love you, my Eleanor. You were the daughter who saved me when I thought I'd lost everything. Please forgive me. Grandma Rose. I sat on the floor of that dusty bedroom as the last light faded from the sky, and I cried. For my grandmother, for the life she lived in secret, for the daughter she lost, for the man she loved and couldn't have, and for myself, for the family I thought I knew that was suddenly so much bigger and more complicated than I'd imagined. Somewhere out there, I had an aunt I had never met. My grandmother had carried the secret for 60 years, and now it was mine. We flew to Seattle on Thursday night. Mom and I barely spoke on the plane. We were both carrying the weight of what was about to happen, a meeting 60 years in the making, orchestrated by a woman who wasn't here to see it. We stayed in a hotel near Margaret's music school. That night, I couldn't sleep. I kept imagining the moment, what we'd say, how she'd react, whether we'd recognize each other as family or just be strangers bound by biology and secrets. At 8 a.m., my phone rang. Margaret. She said I'm sorry to call so early. She sounded like she hadn't slept either. I can't wait until afternoon. Can we meet now for breakfast? There's a cafe near my school. I'll send you the address. Mom and I got dressed quickly, nervous and eager. We took a car to the cafe, a small place with mismatched furniture and the smell of coffee and fresh bread. We got there first and sat at a table by the window. What if she doesn't like us? Mom said suddenly. She was gripping her coffee cup too tight. What if she blames us for not finding her sooner? Then we'll deal with it, I said. We can't undo the past. We can only... The door opened. A woman walked in. Late 50s, dark curly hair with silver streaks, warm brown skin, kind eyes behind glasses. She was wearing jeans and a purple sweater. She saw us. She stopped. I stood. Margaret? She nodded. She walked toward us slowly, like she was approaching something fragile. And then she was standing in front of my mother, and they were looking at each other. Two sisters who never met, who lived separate lives, who shared a mother neither of them fully understood. You look like her, Margaret said. In the photos Eleanor sent. You have her eyes. So do you, Mom said. Her voice was shaking. You have her smile. They stood awkwardly for a moment. Then Margaret opened her arms and Mom stepped into them, and they held each other while I stood to the side and tried not to cry. We sat, we ordered food no one really ate, and we began. I brought everything, I said, pulling folders from my bag. Letters, photos, the birth certificate, my grandmother's note to me, all of it. Margaret spread them on the table with trembling hands. She picked up the photo of Rose and Thomas in front of the house.
She traced their faces with her finger. "This is them," she said. "This is them, my parents, my real parents. Your birth parents," I said gently. "Your adoptive parents were real too." "I know," she said. "I love them. They gave me everything. But there was this hole, this not knowing. And now," she looked up at us with tears streaming down her face, "now I know." She read the letters, all of them. We sat in that cafe for 2 hours while Margaret read 60 years of her birth mother's love, regret, and longing. When she finished, she said she tried to keep me. "She did," I said. "They forced her to give you up, her husband, her parents. They said a mixed-race child would suffer. They said she was being selfish." "Did she ever try to find me after I was adopted?" I showed her the private investigator's report from 2010. She searched for years. She hired investigators, she kept hoping, but the adoption was sealed, and when your adoptive mother stopped writing, the trail went cold. My adoptive mother never told me she was writing to anyone. I found a box after she died, letters in her handwriting. I didn't know what they were. I threw them away. Her face crumpled. "I threw them away. They were to Rose, weren't they? Updates about me." "Probably," I said. "I destroyed them," Margaret said. "I destroyed the only connection between us." "You didn't know," Mom said. "You can't blame yourself for that." Margaret looked at her, really looked at her. "You're my sister," she said. It sounded like she was testing the words. "I am," Mom said. "Half-sister. But yes." "Did you know about me?" Margaret asked. "Before Eleanor found the letters?" "No," Mom said. "Mom never told me. She never told anyone. You were her secret." "Why? Why keep it secret? Why not tell you at least?" "Shame. Fear. The 1960s weren't kind to women who had children out of wedlock, especially in interracial relationships. She thought she was protecting everyone by staying silent. She was protecting herself," Margaret said, not angrily, just truthfully. "From judgment, from having to explain." "Maybe," I said. "Or maybe she was protecting you. If people knew you existed, they'd ask questions, they'd judge you. She thought silence was safety." "Silence is never safety," Margaret said. "Silence is erasure. I spent my whole life not knowing who I was because she chose silence." Mom reached across the table. "I'm sorry for what she did, for what our family did. You deserve better." Margaret took her hand. "Thank you," she said. "But I don't blame you. You didn't know." "I should have known," Mom said. There were gaps in Mom's stories. Times she'd get this look on her face like she was somewhere else. "I should have asked more questions." "We all should have," I said. We sat in the weight of that for a moment. Then Margaret said, "There's something I need to tell you about my life, about who I am." She pulled out her phone and showed us photos. She has 2 children, Marcus, he's 33, he's a doctor in Portland, and Lily, she's 31, she's a teacher here in Seattle. They both know I was adopted. They've always known I was searching. She scrolled to more photos. "And I have 4 grandchildren. You have great nieces and nephews." She looked at Mom. "You have grandchildren you didn't know existed." Mom stared at the photos. "They're beautiful," she whispered. "They want to meet you," Margaret said. "When I told them I found my birth family, they were so excited." Lily cried. Marcus kept saying, "We have more family." "They want to know you." "We want to know them too," Mom said. Margaret set down her phone. "There's something else. Something I found out when I did a DNA test 3 years ago." My heart sank. "What?"
"When?" she asked. "Now," Mom said. "Let's go now." We drove to Willowbrook in Margaret's car, the 3 of us, strangers becoming family. We pulled up to 412 Maple Street in the afternoon light, the maple trees aflame with fall colors, the house waiting like it had been waiting for 60 years. "I have a genetic condition," Margaret said. "Sickle cell trait. It's from my father, from Thomas. It can be passed down. My son has it. One of my grandchildren has it." She looked at us. "If you have children, if they have children, they could have it too. You should get tested. You should know." "Thank you," I said, "for telling us." "It's not just about medical history," Margaret said. "It's about identity. I spent my whole life not knowing I was half Black, not knowing my father's heritage, not understanding why I looked the way I did, why I felt drawn to certain music, certain foods, certain cultures. I built my identity from scratch because no one told me where I came from." She pulled out a folder of her own. "When I got your letter, I started searching. I found Thomas's family. He had a sister who's still alive. She lives in North Carolina. Her name is Josephine. She's 87. My breath caught. "You found them?" "I called her yesterday," Margaret said. "I told her who I was." She cried. She said, "We've been looking for you for 60 years. She said Thomas never stopped talking about me, about the baby he lost. She said the family knew. They wanted to help, but Rose's family threatened them, told them to stay away or they'd call the police, claimed Thomas had done something criminal." "Oh God," Mom said. "Josephine wants to meet me," Margaret said. "She has photos of Thomas, stories, a whole family history I never knew existed. And she wants to meet you too. She said anyone Rose loved is family to us." She looked at me, then at Mom. "I didn't just find my mother's family when you wrote to me. I found two families, two histories, two halves of myself I've been missing my whole life." "What do you need from us?" I asked. "I need the truth," Margaret said. "All of it. No more secrets, no more protection. I need to know everything about Rose, the good and the bad. I need to know why she made the choices she made. I need to understand." I pulled out my grandmother's letter, the one she'd left for me. "This might help," I said. I handed it to Margaret. "She wrote this for me, but I think it's really for you." "Thanks to you," she said. "If you hadn't found that key, Grandma left it for me to find," I said. "She wanted this. She was just too afraid to do it herself." "Do you forgive her?" Mom asked, "for keeping the secret?" I thought about it. I'm trying to. Some days I do. Some days I'm angry at her for waiting until she was dead to tell the truth. But mostly I'm just sad. Sad that she carried this alone for so long. Sad that she never got to see this. I gestured to the room full of family, laughing, connecting, healing. "She sees it," Mom said. "Wherever she is. She sees it." Christmas, we all gathered at the house. Margaret and her children, Mom and me, Josephine, and 3 of Thomas's relatives who flew in. Aunt Linda, who came reluctantly, but came. Linda walked through the house with a drink in her hand and a complicated expression on her face. "I remember when this happened," she said to me, "when Mom disappeared for those months. I was 13. I knew something was wrong. I just didn't know what." "Why didn't you tell anyone later?" I asked, "when you were older?" "Because I was afraid," Linda said. "Afraid of the scandal, afraid of what it would do to the family, afraid people would judge us." She looked around at the family gathered, Black and white, young and old, bound by love and loss. I was wrong. I should have helped her. I should have fought for her to keep Margaret. "You were a child," I said. "I was," Linda agreed. "But later I was an adult, and I still chose silence." She looked at Margaret across the room. "Because family isn't just the stories we tell. It's also the stories we uncover, the truths we're brave enough to face, the love we're willing to fight for, even when it's been buried for 60 years. The house at 412 Maple Street still stands. The maple trees are taller now. The porch has been reinforced. The rooms have been filled with new memories. But if you stand in the nursery and listen carefully, you can still hear the echoes: a mother's grief, a father's love, a daughter's cry. And if you listen even more carefully, you can hear something else: laughter, music, the sound of a family that refused to stay broken. That's my grandmother's real legacy. Not the secret, but what happened when the secret was finally told. Not the silence, but the song that came after. I visit her grave every year on the anniversary of the day I found the key. I bring flowers, I sit on the grass, I tell her about the year, about Margaret's book, about the new babies, about the music school thriving, about the family that keeps growing and healing and learning how to love each other through the complicated truth of who we are. Thank you, Grandma, I say every time, for trusting me with the truth, for leaving me the key. And in the whisper of wind through the trees, in the warmth of sun on my face, in the peace that settles in my chest when I'm there, I swear I can hear her answer. You're welcome, my Eleanor. You are always the one who knew how to look, the one who wouldn't let things stay hidden. I'm so proud of you. I leave the cemetery feeling lighter. I drive home to my own house, my own life, built on the foundation of truth she left me. And I carry the key. Always. Not because I need to unlock anything else, but because I want to remember that secrets have weight, that truth has power, that family is worth fighting for, even when, especially when, it's been lost for 60 years. Grandma's secret inheritance wasn't money or property. It was the courage to face the truth and the faith that I would know what to do with it. She was right. I did.
And Thomas, Margaret added. She placed a hand on his stone. We're here because they loved each other, because they were brave enough to try, even when the world said no. Mom put flowers on both graves. I'm sorry it took so long, she said. I'm sorry we didn't find you sooner, Margaret. I'm sorry you grew up without knowing us. But I'm grateful we found each other now. I'm grateful for the time we have. Me too, Margaret said. I stood back and watched my family, complicated, broken, healing, whole, gathered around two graves in the spring sunshine. I thought about the key taped to the back of a photograph, about the safe in a hidden house, about a grandmother who'd kept secrets for 60 years and then, in death, finally told the truth. It wasn't a perfect inheritance. It came with pain and questions and wounds that would never fully heal. But it also came with love, with family, with the music of Thomas's saxophone and the warmth of Sunday dinners, and the knowledge that we belonged to each other. And that, in the end, was enough. 5 years have passed since I found the key. The house at 412 Maple Street is no longer a secret or a shrine. It's a home, Margaret's home, but also ours, all of ours. I visit every few months, sometimes with Mom, sometimes alone. I sleep in the guest room that used to be a nursery surrounded by the yellow walls Rose painted with hope 60 years ago. In the mornings, I make coffee in the kitchen where Rose and Thomas once planned their future, and I feel them there, not as ghosts, but as the foundation we've built on. Margaret is 60 now. Her hair is more silver than dark now, pulled back in the same neat bun Rose used to wear. She teaches music 6 days a week, her calendar full of students who call her Miss Margaret and don't know they're being taught by a woman who carries 2 lineages, 2 histories, 2 families in her heart. Last month she called me. "I'm writing a book," she said, "about Rose and Thomas, about being separated from my birth family and finding them again, about what secrets do to people and what truth can heal." "That's wonderful," I said. "I want you to read it before I publish. Make sure I got the facts right. Make sure I'm being fair to Rose." "You'll be fair," I said. "You've always been fair." I read the manuscript in 2 days. Margaret wrote with honesty and grace about the mother who gave her up, the parents who raised her, the family that found her. She wrote about anger and forgiveness living side by side, about how you can love someone and still wish they'd made different choices. On the last page, she wrote, "Rose taught me something even in her absence. She taught me that secrets are corrosive, that silence, even when it's meant to protect, often does more harm than good. She taught me that the truth, no matter how painful, is always better than a beautiful lie. I wish she'd learned that lesson sooner, but I'm grateful she left me the key to discovering it myself." The book will publish next year. Margaret is donating the proceeds to a foundation she's starting, helping adoptees search for birth families, funding DNA tests for those who can't afford them, supporting interracial families. In honor of Rose and Thomas, the foundation will be called "Making Sure No One Else Has to Spend 60 Years Not Knowing Where They Came From." Mom is 70 now. She retired from her job and moved to Willowbrook, into a small house 3 blocks from Margaret. They have coffee every Tuesday morning. They've become what they should have been all along, sisters. "I lost 60 years with her," she said to me last Christmas. "I won't lose another day." They've discovered they share Rose's love of old movies, Thomas's stubborn streak, a tendency to cry at commercials, and a fierce protectiveness of family. They bicker sometimes about politics, about recipes, about whose turn it is to host dinner. It's ordinary and beautiful, and exactly what Rose would have wanted. Aunt Linda died 2 years ago. Before she passed, she wrote letters to Margaret, to Mom, to me, long letters apologizing for her silence, for choosing protection over truth, for letting fear guide her when love should have guided her. "I watched Rose suffer," she wrote to Margaret. "I knew she was grieving you. I could have pushed her to search harder, to speak up, to fight. Instead, I stayed quiet. I told myself it was none of my business. I was wrong. I'm sorry." Margaret framed the letter. "She tried," she said when I asked her about it. "At the end, she tried to make it right. That matters." Thomas's family has become part of our family. We gather for holidays, Thanksgiving at the Willowbrook house, Christmas rotating between families. The kids, Margaret's grandchildren, now joined by Marcus's 2 daughters and Lily's son, run through the rooms where Rose and Thomas once dreamed, filling it with noise and joy and the future their great-great-grandparents didn't get to see. Last summer, we had a reunion, 60 people. Descendants of Rose, descendants of Thomas, people connected by blood and choice and the strange paths that bring families together. Josephine, now 92, sat in the place of honor and told stories about Thomas that made him real. Not a tragic figure in an old photograph, but a man who loved music and terrible jokes and children, who believed in justice even when justice didn't believe in him. He'd love this, she said, looking around at the family he'd created without knowing it. All of you, together. This is what he wanted, what they both wanted. I'm 39 now. I've spent 5 years helping other people find their families, uncover their secrets, piece together the stories that were hidden or lost. Some reunions are joyful, some are painful. Some people don't want to be found. But I tell them all the same thing. The truth might hurt, but it also heals. And you deserve to know your story. I think about Rose often, about the young woman in the photograph standing in front of a house with hope in her eyes, about the old woman I knew, quiet and careful, carrying a secret that must have weighed more than I can imagine. I wish I could tell her what happened after she died, that we found Margaret, that the family came together, that the house is full of life and music and the laughter of children who carry both her legacy and Thomas's. I wish I could tell her that we understand. Not that we approve of the choices she made, but that we understand the world that made her make them. That we see her not as a villain or a saint, but as a complicated woman who loved deeply and lost deeply and did the best she could with impossible choices. I wish I could tell her that Margaret forgave her. Not all at once, not perfectly, but enough. Enough to say her name without bitterness. Enough to teach her own children about their great-grandmother Rose, who loved a man the world said she shouldn't love, and loved a daughter she couldn't keep, and kept both loves alive in the only way she knew how. But mostly, I wish I could tell her, thank you. Thank you for leaving the key. Thank you for trusting me to find it. Thank you for being brave enough, even in death, to tell the truth. Because of that key, I know my family, the whole family, not the edited version. I know about love that crosses boundaries, about courage and cowardice, about secrets and the cost of keeping them. Because of that key, Margaret knows where she comes from. She knows she was wanted. She knows she was loved even in the letting go. Because of that key, we're all whole in a way we couldn't have been if the secret had died with Rose. The inheritance wasn't the house. The house was just wood and nails and the ghosts of what might have been. The inheritance was the truth. And the truth, painful, complicated, beautiful truth, set us all free. I keep the key on a chain around my neck now. The small brass key that unlocked a safe, a secret, a family. When people ask about it, I tell them the story, the short version, the one that fits in casual conversation. But sometimes when I have time, when someone really wants to listen, I tell the whole story. About Rose and Thomas, about Margaret lost and found, about a family broken by silence and healed by truth. That's incredible, people say. You're so lucky you found her. I am, but it wasn't luck. It was choice. My grandmother's choice to leave the key, my choice to use it, and Margaret's choice to let us in. Would you do it again? They ask, knowing how hard it was. Every time I answer the same way. Yes. 1,000 times yes.